Hello everybody, I'm Sam. I am a senior communication studies major at Rider. And as a senior who's going to be graduating in May, I am stoked. I am super excited to be done. What I'm not super excited about is the $45,000 of student loan debt that I owe. That is between private loans and between federal loans. I owe some money, and it's pretty terrifying. The student loan debt crisis is real. It's very real for graduates in America. There are people in their late 50s who are still paying back loans. I know I have family members who are in their 40s, have kids, and are married, and they're still paying back loans. It really is a crisis. Just for a little context, about 1 out of every 8 people who are in a 4-year school, so any sort of university, private, public, whatever it is, 1 out of every 8 have taken out loans, whether that's public or private loans, federal loans, and also out of those students who have taken out loans, on average, anybody who has a loan pays about $400 every single month. That's a lot of money. That's a car payment. Or for some people, that might even be a health insurance payment. That's a significant amount of money to be shelling out every single month. And also, I don't understand this too much. I had to do a lot of research about it, but there is something called the debt cycle in America. And basically, it's just this big cycle. And it's people borrow money from institutions or banks or whatever, or the government. They borrow. And typically in a perfect society, a perfect economy, they'd be paying it back. Everything would be working. They would be able to pay it back. While simultaneously still being able to stimulate the economy in other ways. And the cycle would continue. Because banks would be able to afford to continue to give out loans because everybody would be paying it back. Unfortunately, that's not the case. At least in today's world, that's not the case. Many people can't afford to simultaneously pay back loans while also paying car payments or, being homeowners. So we'll talk about that a little later on, but just keep in mind that the crisis is real. There are a lot of people struggling with it. So moving on to my first argument. My first argument is more so about personal health. It's about personal mental health and the toll that having large amounts of debt really, really plays on you. So 9 out of 10 borrowers have described having major anxiety. I know for me, the minute I logged onto my student loan account and I saw that it was almost $45,000, my heart went like that. It freaked out because it's terrifying. It really is terrifying, especially when you're signing into these loans so young. I was 18 when I first got my first loan. Didn't really think anything of it. And of course, universities are providing courses you have to take before you take out a loan. But in reality, a lot of people taking out loans are just their kids. They don't understand. So when it comes time for graduation and you realize how much money you owe somebody, it's terrifying. And 53% of all borrowers have described having major depressive episodes because of their debt. So on top of everything else people are dealing with, having debt hanging over your head at all times of the day, it's exhausting. It really can be exhausting, and it takes a big toll on mental health. My next argument is going to be that the country, in terms of student loan debt, we are in it. We owe a lot of people money. Students all over America owe about $1.7 trillion. 1.7 trillion, not million, not billion, trillion. That is a very large amount of money. And this goes back to the debt cycle that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So, like I said, when you have students who take out a loan of $20,000, let's say, and they take it out to pay for their college, their 3rd year of school, whatever it is. Back in the olden days, when the debt wasn't as big, it was a lot easier for students to pay things back because college wasn't nearly as expensive. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But students could pay back their loans instead of having to default. But in today's world, a lot of students and graduates can't pay back their loans in full or in a really timely manner. People have to make minimum payments, and that leads to a crisis within the institutions that are letting out these loans. So because of that, two cycles right there, 2 steps in the cycle. Because of student loan debt, a lot of graduates, like I mentioned before, they're not buying houses. They're not even looking to buy houses. People aren't buying cars or even leasing cars as much as they should or could, because a $400 a month student loan payment, hefty, especially, if you were to combine that with a car payment and you were to combine that with, if you have a mortgage or if you have kids, people can't afford to do one while simultaneously doing all of the others. So it leads to this endless vicious debt cycle of can't borrow money because I can't afford school, can't really pay it back, can't do anything else to stimulate the economy. And it's really, really overwhelming for, number one, students, but also for these institutions that are offering these loans. And moving on to my third argument, tuition increases. I cannot understand how tuitions can continuously increase while the living wage, the minimum wage at this point in the country is still below $8. Most companies are offering between 10 and 12 just to be competitive, but there are still places that are offering $8 as minimum wage, or $8.25 or $8.50. Yet colleges are upwards of $65,000 a year. So I think it's really difficult as a student to want to better yourself and to want to live a better life and to, get a college education so you can get a higher paying job, while simultaneously not being able to pay back your loans because you don't have a livable wage right now. In one of the articles that I read, the author was quoted and he said, if you can't lower tuition costs, or if you can't raise minimum wage to make it a livable wage, we need to eliminate debt obligations. And I couldn't agree more. I honestly could not agree more. Because how are people expected to pay all of that money back while trying to better themselves while not making nearly enough money to do any of it? And I'm sure, at least in my world, I know a lot of older people who have gone head to head with me about arguing this. And a lot of people say, well, I put my way through college, I paid my way, I paid my loans, and nobody had to help me. Well, that's awesome. That's great for you. And I think that's fantastic that you were able to do that. But if you compare when the people who are now 55, 65, who typically have those kinds of arguments, if you compare when those people went to school versus us going to school now, the wages are pretty similar, with maybe $1 or $2 influx. And tuition prices have increased substantially, significantly, astronomically. I can't say enough words about it. So for people to say, well, I was able to do it. Yeah, you were able to do it 25, 30 years ago. The world has changed. The prices have changed. I can't afford to pay $65,000 out of pocket every year. I can't afford to do that without taking a loan. It makes it really, really difficult for people. And then the second most popular argument that I've heard is you shouldn't take out a loan if you can't pay it back. And while in theory, I get this one, I understand it, but in reality, how are people expected to go out and get high-paying jobs when a bachelor's degree is like the bare minimum requirement at this point? Associate's degrees, you can get it, but even those programs are still kind of expensive for people. And most companies won't even look at you if you don't have a bachelor's degree. And some people won't even look at you if you don't have a master's degree. How are you supposed to get a job? How are you supposed to get a higher paying job if you can't, get the education that you need to get those